First, the defendant's present with Mr. Lewis, Mr. Chesnoff, and Mr. DeGuerin, and we have Mr. Bailey and Mr. Henderson, Mr. Miata, and Mr. Lewin. All jurors and alternates have returned. The defendant is present. You may resume your cross-examination.
Mr. Durst, will you agree that in the BD story there is no mention of you ever having gone in December of 2000 to visit Susan Berman?
Judge Susan.
What's that?
Excuse me, Judge Susan Chris, the judge who handled the Galveston trial, issued an order saying that neither side, while I was being tried for Morris Black's death, could bring up the fact that my friend Susan Berman had died. So I left Susan Berman out of what I gave to Risa Cheatham and Emily Altman entirely.
Wait, so now your testimony is that the reason that the BD story doesn't have any mention of Susan Berman is because you were trying to comply with a judge's order? Is that your testimony?
I did comply with the judge's order, and I left out Los Angeles and Susan Berman.
Well, Mr. Durst, why would you have to leave out the fact that you went to Los Angeles? You don't have to mention anything about Susan Berman.
I guess I could have said I was in Los Angeles, but since all I did in Los Angeles was to see Susan Berman, I left out everything having to do with Susan Berman.
Right, but Mr. Durst, you're saying that you were not allowed to bring up Susan Berman and that neither side was allowed to bring up Susan Berman. So you certainly could have said, I went to Los Angeles, and Susan Berman never would have been brought up according to this, quote, ruling that you're bringing up now. Would you agree?
Quote, ruling.
Yeah, quote, ruling.
Yeah, it was an order that she issued.
Right, which you're just mentioning now, correct?
I just thought of it now. Correct.
Okay, let's move on to the next area. You took a trip to Switzerland in mid-October of 2000, is that correct?
Correct.
And you traveled from New York City, is that right?
I don't remember.
Do you recall, Mr. Durst, being in Switzerland from October 16th to October 19th?
Yes.
And would you agree that's a very short trip to go all the way to Switzerland?
Very short trip. I went to a wedding, which Town and Country magazine described as the social event of the fall.
Are you someone that traditionally is into social events?
I was into that one.
What was it? Now we got to know.
The Emir of Kuwait's daughter was marrying a friend of mine who worked for United Bank of Switzerland.
And it's your testimony that at the time you went to Switzerland in mid-October, that was before you found out about the reinvestigation on October 31st. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, prior to leaving New York City, did you send 2 packages to yourself in Switzerland?
I don't recall.
If you had sent yourself money, for instance, to be sent to where you were going in Switzerland, is that something you would remember?
Well, I don't remember sending myself packages in Switzerland.
Right. Would you agree that over the years, you've had a habit of stealing and using other people's identities and social security numbers?
I don't know what you mean, habit.
Well, you've done it repeatedly, correct?
Stealing their identities. I've used aliases, yes.
Well, they're aliases generally of real people and often involve their real social security numbers, correct?
I don't know what social security numbers, but when I use an alias, I use someone who I used to know so that I can remember what my alias is.
Well, as an example, you ended up going down to Galveston as Dorothy Signer, correct?
I don't, yes, correct, but I never had her social security number.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that the loss of your wife, Kathy, is one of the most traumatic events, if not the most traumatic event of your life?
I would agree.
And would you agree that it's been difficult for you to even have to think about your missing wife?
Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes I get much enjoyment out of thinking about the good times.
Right, and let me ask you, Mr. Durst, you wouldn't use your wife's social security number, would you?
Well, I don't know. It depends on the circumstances.
Well, Mr. Durst, your wife is missing, so my question to you would be, would you literally use her social security number, which would make you have to think about her in the context of falsifying an identity? Would you do that?
I have no idea what the question is.
Have you used your wife's social security number, Mr. Durst, when you have impersonated other individuals, where you've given a name of an individual and then you've used your wife's social security number?
Is that a question?
It's a question. Have you done that?
Have I used my wife's social security number?
Have you used your wife's social security number in the context of providing it as the social security number for a person that is not Kathy?
I don't recall doing that.
Now, we'll come back to that. I just want you to think about that. I'm going to be asking about that when we get to that area.
We have a moment here?
Yeah.
Sure.
People's,
Let's.
well, first ask them some questions, then we'll put it up.
All right, Mr. Durst, if you were ordered not to discuss anything about Susan Berman, then her name should be nowhere in your BD story, correct?
Correct.
Go ahead, Mr. Balian.
People's 198, page 11.
Uh-oh. January 9th, 2001.
That kind of comment.
Mr. Lewin, the comment, uh-oh, is not appropriate. This is
Understood,
the
Your
second time in 2 days that you've made a comment after the witness has given a statement, a form of derision.
I won't do it again, Your Honor.
You better not.
Understood. January 9th, 2001. Message on service from Julie Baumgold and Nick. It says Chavis that Susan Berman, our mutual friend who lives in Los Angeles, was murdered in her home on Christmas Eve. Mr. Durst, wouldn't that be directly in contradiction to what you just said?
It's totally in contradiction. I'm surprised it's in there.
Well, it is in there though, right?
It is in there.
And you said, by the way, Mr. Durst, didn't you prepare this document before Judge Chris made any of her rulings regarding what was going to be admissible and not admissible in the trial?
I don't remember whether I gave information to Lisa Cheatham and Emily Altman before or after Judge Chris ruled that neither party could bring up Susan Berman.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true that literally that story about Judge Chris, which you said you just thought of right now, you are literally making this up as you sit here on the witness stand, correct?
Well, I think Judge Susan Chris, is the correct name for the judge who tried me, who was supervising the trial in Galveston. How could I be making that up?
Mr. Durst, I'm not asking if you're making up Judge Chris's name. I'm asking if you're making up this idea that Judge Chris told you you were not allowed to discuss anything about Los Angeles, and that is why, or Susan Berman, that is why you didn't have any information about it on the BD story. That's what I'm asking you. You're making it up, correct?
I am not. This is Judge Chris issued a court order. How could I make that up?
Well, Mr. Durst.
This is another thing where I couldn't possibly lie, because somewhere out there in the records there is a court order that neither the defense nor the prosecution can talk about Susan Berman.
And Mr. Durst, you have said that you made up this document before and in preparation for trial, and you said that you were told that you could not mention anything about Susan Berman or Los Angeles, and that's why you put nothing about it in the BD story. Do you remember that testimony from a few minutes ago? That's what you said, correct?
Correct.
Yet, Mr. Durst, you not only mentioned Los Angeles and mentioned Susan Berman, you mentioned the fact that she was murdered in the BD story, correct?
Correct.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that that means that at the very least you were wrong about what you've said, and that at the very most you lied about it?
At the very least, the rest of that paragraph has my lawyer, Joel Cohn, asking me what I did at a certain time and asking me about Susan Berman. He wanted to know if it was true that I had walked Susan Berman down the aisle at her wedding.
Motion to strike is non-responsive.
Stricken.
Mr. Durst, listen to my question, please. Do you agree that at the very least you were wrong about your statement regarding that there was nothing in the BD story because of an order from Judge Berman, from Judge Chris, but that another reasonable interpretation would be that you lied about it?
I was mistaken.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the Kathy Durst reinvestigation. When did you find out about it?
October 31st.
And is it correct?
Wait a minute, let me get this right.
What's that?
I said give me a moment to figure this out.
Okay.
This is a reinvestigation.
Court's 13.
Oh, okay.
October 31st, 2000.
Okay. I want to go back, Mr. Durst. Obviously, as I sit here and you answer certain questions, I don't have the ability while I'm talking to you in real time to look up what you say. But Mr. Balian has pulled your Galveston testimony. And what we see here is on page 83, here you are mentioning Susan Berman in court. Do you see that? I want you to read that to yourself.
The yellow makes it hard for me to read it.
Okay, I'll read it for you. Tell us about it. What happened on January the 9th? Answer. We were like mad at UCLA in 1965. Susan Berman, even though she was in California and I was in New York, and I never went to Los Angeles, so even though I would go to California, I would not go there to see her. We had seen each other infrequently, but we had stayed in touch by writing and telephone calls, and like that, and we were still close. I could talk to her about things. I got 2 voicemail messages. Question, who were the voicemail messages from? Answer, Julie Baumgold and Nick Chabin. Question, who is Julie Baumgold? Well, answer, well, she is a woman and I knew her from when I was a child. Her parents were very good friends, and then we go on. I'm going to skip, and then it says, Question, and what was the message? Both of them left essentially the same message, that I should go to the LA Times on the internet, that Susan Berman had been murdered over Christmas. Now, I believe, Mr. Durst, this is not cross-examination. This is your lawyer taking you through Susan Berman's murder. Do you see that?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Durst, how on earth can your statement be true that Judge Chris ordered that you were not allowed to talk about Susan Berman when your own lawyer is asking you questions and you're going through the whole thing?
Susan Chris did issue an order that neither side could talk about Susan Berman. Why my lawyers did not follow the order,
Excuse me,
you'll
Your
have to
Honor.
ask them.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Yes.
May we have a sidebar?
All right. All right, you may resume.
Mr. Durst, so would you now agree, your testimony was that Judge Chris made an order that you were not allowed to talk about Galveston, and that because of that order, you didn't put anything in the BD story to comply with that order, and that there was no testimony regarding anything about Susan Berman in the case? You now agree that, in essence, that's all untrue, correct?
That's incorrect.
Well, you would agree, Mr. Durst, that Judge Chris can't make an order that you can't put anything in, strike that. Judge Chris cannot make an order before your case is starting, and you've already admitted that your preparation, the BD story, was done in advance of your trial, correct?
The preparation for the trial was done. There was a 2-year lag between when I was arrested in Galveston and when I was tried. And all that time, there was preparation for the trial.
Mr. Durst, isn't it true that what the order related to was not you and your side being able to talk about Susan Berman? It was an order that the prosecution was not going to be able to bring her up. Isn't that true?
To the best of my knowledge, it was neither side could bring up Susan Berman.
Well, Mr. Durst, if that was true, then how was it that your lawyer, in direct examination, is asking all about not just Susan Berman, but her murder? Can you explain that?
I think that's a question for Dick DeGuerin.
Well, Mr. Durst, do you really think that it makes sense that Mr. DeGuerin, having an order that he's not allowed to discuss something, is going to literally bring it up and start asking you questions about it?
Well, even Dick makes mistakes.
Mr. Durst, did you see an objection or an admonition by the judge?
Do I see an objection?
To any of this testimony, or an admonition by the judge saying, Mr. DeGuerin, you know you're not allowed to discuss that information?
I don't know what the question is.
Do you see an objection in that transcript, Mr. Durst, after Mr. DeGuerin brings up and starts asking you questions about Susan Berman's murder? Do you see an objection?
I don't see an objection.
Do you see an admonition by the judge saying, to the effect of, Mr. DeGuerin, you know you're not allowed to bring that up? That doesn't exist, correct?
I don't see the court doing anything.
So would you agree, Mr. Durst, that your version that you weren't allowed to bring up Susan Berman at all does not appear to be supported by the very transcript you said would not contain any information about Susan Berman or her murder?
Well, first, I need to remind you that I deny having written the BD story. I deny having written any version of the BD story. I did give information to Dorisa Cheatham and to Emily Altman, and between the two of them, they wrote the BD story. I've done everything I possibly can to comply with the order that Judge Chris gave, which I believe dealt with both parties.
Mr. Durst, you previously testified that you were the person who did the timeline within the BD story. You further testified, Mr. Durst, and acknowledged that there was no information about Susan Berman in the BD story, correct?
You just showed me that there was information about Susan Berman.
No, that's what you said. You said there was no information about
Oh.
Susan Berman in the BD story, correct?
I think I said I hadn't read the thing.
No, Mr. Durst, you said that you were told, what you said was, is I deliberately did not mention Susan Berman or Los Angeles because there was an order. That's what you testified to, correct?
Correct.
You also said, Mr. Durst, withdraw that. Isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that what happened was you needed to explain why it was that on December 23rd you mentioned nothing about Los Angeles? And so in order to explain why you had deliberately left out that information, you came up with a crazy lie about not being able to mention Susan Berman at all, and that there was nothing in the BD story and nothing in the transcript of the trial. That's what happened, correct?
No, that is not what happened. Judge Susan Chris did issue an order, and the order has got to be in the public domain, and I'm sure the order exists.
All right, let's go back to when you found out that the authorities were reinvestigating Kathy's disappearance. Was your response, well, this is great, maybe they can find out what happened to my missing wife after almost 20 years? Was that your response?
I don't know what the question is.
When you found out, allegedly on October 31st, 2000, that they were reopening the investigation into your wife's disappearance, was your response, great, maybe they can solve my wife's disappearance?
When I allegedly found out on October 31st, 2000, that this DA in Westchester County by the name of Janine Pirro was opening an investigation of the disappearance of Kathy Durst so that Janine Pirro could get lots of publicity, and that she was going to use me to get this publicity so that she could run for Attorney General. I threw up.
Mr. Durst, you threw up not because they were reopening the investigation into your wife, but because you knew you had killed her and you knew you were going to be the target of that investigation, correct?
Incorrect.
All right, let's talk about November 5th, 2000. Did you receive a letter from Susan Berman? This is LADA 037052.
Don't recall it, I could have.
313.
Okay.
One page left.
313?
Can you make it a little bigger if you can? The letter says, it's dated November 5th, 2000. Go lower. Dearest Bobby, I just wanted you to know how much I appreciated the 2 times you helped me and what a wonderful friend you've been, like the brother I never had, over the 30-odd years. I'm sorry I even had to ask the last time, and ever, Bobby. You know that our friendship was never about money. I'm so sorry that I've been struggling these last few years, and I hope to see you someday again. I don't want my last request to be the last time we communicate. Our friendship means so much to me, Bobby. I hope you forgive me for not keeping pace with your more successful life. I am still hoping to turn everything around so I will be able to repay you. Miraculously, I am still in my house, not that I want to be, but I have nowhere to move. I have to keep my 3 dogs. Lulu is already 12. They have become my family, as a domestic harmony has been the one area of life that I've never been able to get quite right. Anyway, my Showtime deal went to the next step just in the nick of time. Now it looks like it will go to pilot, but I won't know until February. Anyway, she will get me out under the landlord moving in rule, but this buys me 3 more months, and then maybe I'll be going to pilot and I'll have the money to move. Fingers crossed. As you know, LA has an almost 0% occupancy rate, and it's not as easy to find a place anymore that takes dogs. And if it goes to series in May, I'd probably be moving to Toronto. Showtime shoots most of its TV series there. Pitching another Vegas series, this time to FX in December, younger demographics. Also, writing a book, Rich Girl Broke, a meditation on money, kind of a memoir about going broke. Almost done with the 40-page book proposal, sending you my prologue, thought it might amuse you. I may have to come to New York to get a new agent because I don't know if it's the type of thing my agent, Owen Laster, at William Morris will spark to sending it to him this week. Already told him about it. It would be nice after the first of the year. I'm sure I would be shocked by the change in New York, having been there since the Dreyfus
Can you
workshop
slow
in
down a little
92.
bit, please?
Life, so many ups and downs, Bobby, and always the unforeseen. Naturally, I'm waif thin and on Prozac from the lack of security and no feeling of well-being about the future. But I feel strong and I work every day trying to turn this around. I'm sure I sent you the outline for the Showtime pilot already. I'll send you the script when it's done. Remember, I don't get to write it, just co-create. If I sell the FX, I'm now at the level where I can co-write the pilot. Climbing up the rungs of TV takes forever, and I never watch it. I'm a book person. You're only one of 3 people in New York that I've kept in touch with. Julie Baumgold, who you introduced me to and who I love, and Florian. Oh, Florian and her 27-year-old son, Jason, who worked at Donaldson, Lufkin, etc., started a .com. It's a business to consumer, whatever that means, and they raise the money. It's not up and running yet, but will be soon. Very proud of Florian. Remember her? She lived at the Croydon. Lorraine is still my best friend out here, and remember Nina Feinberg. I live in her place at the Park Wellington. She's become a very successful sitcom producer and has a sitcom running about her own life, the Gina Davis Show. Nina married Ted Wass, who had 2 kids, so it's on that angle. 30-ish career woman becomes an instant mother. I hope I haven't disappointed you as a friend, Bobby. All love and gratitude for friendship over the years. This button indicates the background printing is off. Do you remember getting this letter, Mr. Durst?
Yes, I remember very well getting the letter.
And this occurred, it was sent November 5th, and you would agree this is after you were aware of the reinvestigation, is that right?
Correct.
And would you agree that the next thing that you did, so you got this letter, and Susan is telling you right at the beginning that she's in an extreme situation financially, is that right? She's been struggling to an extreme degree, especially over the last few years, correct?
That's what the letter said.
And she says to you, she apologizes for having to ask for money, but thanks you for having done that, correct?
Correct.
Now, she does not actually directly ask you for money in this letter, does she?
She's asking for money.
Well, can you tell me where specifically she said in this letter, Bobby, send me money?
She's asking for money. You can't read the letter and come to any conclusion. The letter made me feel very bad for her.
Right, so what Susan was doing, agreed, Mr. Durst, is rather than asking you directly for money, she was telling you she's in a bad financial situation and you've always been a good friend, and you responded by writing her a check for 25 grand, correct?
I don't recall. I wrote her a check. I don't recall how much it was for.
All right, we'll get there. On November 6th, let's put it up, LADA 127370.
No, this equals 118.
118.
This is a check dated November 9th for $25,000. That's right after you got the letter, correct?
Correct.
On November 6th and 7th of 2000, you met with criminal attorney Joe Cohen of Strzok & Strzok. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you've spoken about this repeatedly. So I'm not asking you about a private attorney-client conversation. You have discussed what Joel Cohen has said to you in the past, correct?
Correct.
And this involved, you met at Strzok & Strzok, this involved your concern that you were about to be charged in connection with Kathy's disappearance, correct?
Correct.
Now, I want you to assume for a moment, Mr. Durst, I want you to assume that Susan Berman had in fact made the phone call to Dean Cooperman. I understand you're saying she didn't, but for the purposes of my question, I want you to assume for a moment that she had made that call. Would you agree that at this time, when you now find out they're reinvestigating it, that you would have had a substantial concern that Susan, with her big mouth, might say something if she was contacted by investigators? Is that a fair
Improper,
statement?
Hypothetical and argumentative.
Overruled.
Is that a fair statement?
Susan had already told a dozen people, or 15 people, or 18 people, that she had given me an alibi by calling Albert Einstein Medical Center. There was no secret about that.
Well, Mr. Durst, you know that she had told people now, but you didn't know that then, correct?
I knew some of them.
Wait, so you knew before Susan had been murdered that she had told people that you had called Albert Einstein, or that she had called Albert Einstein pretending to be Kathy at your request?
I knew that Susan Berman had told people that she telephoned Albert Einstein at my request.
And how did you know that?
I think I heard it from both Julie Baumgold and Nick Chavin.
So it's your testimony, Mr. Durst, that you were aware, prior to Susan being murdered, that she had told people that she had called Albert Einstein pretending to be Kathy. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when did you find out about that?
I think Julie said something to me a long, long time before Susan Berman died. Like maybe 5 years before. Nick Chavin said something not that long before Susan Berman died.
Would it have
And
been,
there was also another lady, Ainsley Pryor, who said that Susan said she called the dean at Albert Einstein and pretended to be Kathy.
so I just want to be clear, so you're now saying that two witnesses who did not even testify, Ainsley Pryor and Julie Baumgold, you're now saying that they told you that Susan had told them that you had called, I'm sorry, that she had called Albert Einstein at your request pretending to be Kathy. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're saying that you knew about this information from all three of these people, at the very least, months, and in some cases, years before Susan was murdered? Is that correct?
Correct.
And it's your further testimony that this is a complete lie, correct?
Correct.
Well, Mr. Durst, when all of a sudden you find out on October 31st that the police are reinvestigating Kathy's disappearance, did you confront Susan Berman with the fact that she's been out there telling a horrible lie about you?
No.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree? Can you think of a worse lie that anybody could say about you, any worse than you killed your wife? Is there a worse lie anyone could come up with?
Well, maybe you killed your mother. That might be worse.
Okay. Wife then is number 2 then, right?
Object to form that question.
You read Susan Berman's letter. That's the way Susan Berman was. It would accomplish nothing for me to tell her to stop making up stories.
Well, Mr. Durst, I would assume that it must have made you incredibly angry to have Susan Berman telling all these people that she had called Albert Einstein pretending to be Kathy to cover up a murder when it wasn't true. That must have really angered you, correct?
It did not anger me. I was used to it.
Well, Mr. Durst, I would assume that even if you didn't get angry about it, did it cause you concern that, oh my God, what if she says that to crazy Janine Pirro? Maybe she'll charge me with murder.
Several of your witnesses have talked about how Susan Berman made up stories all the time. Linda Ope said Susan Berman made up stories all the time. Steve Silverman said sort of the same thing. And Charles Lackman repeated it several times.
Do you recall the witnesses also testifying, Mr. Durst, that nearly every witness that Susan idolized you and that they could understand her lying to protect you, but that none of them felt it conceivable that she would make up a damaging story about you killing your wife if it didn't happen? Do you recall that testimony?
No, I recall the testimony that Susan told everybody that I was her best buddy.
So let me ask you, Mr. Durst, would you agree, you've said that Janine Pirro was crazy and was going to use you to work her way to the governor's mansion, is that correct?
The Attorney General.
Oh, Attorney General, I'm sorry. That's your testimony, correct?
I don't think I said she was crazy.
Oh, okay. Was your position of Janine Pirro that she was an unethical prosecutor who was going to use you unethically to promote her career?
Correct.
So, wouldn't you have been concerned then that Susan Berman is out there, your best friend, saying not only that you confessed to her that you murdered Kathy, but that she made the call? Weren't you concerned that if Janine Pirro found out about that, that could get you indicted and convicted of murder?
I don't think Susan Berman was believable.
Well, you've said you weren't angry, is that correct?
Correct.
Can you explain how could you not be angry about your best friend in the world making up a complete story that you had murdered your wife? How would that not make anybody angry?
Well, you just read her letter. That was the way Susan was.
Well, forgetting about how Susan was, how could how Susan was being basically falsely accusing you of murdering your wife, how could that not have made you angry?
She didn't accuse me of murdering my wife. She did say I, Susan Berman, sent the letter to the dean at the medical school. As far as Susan Berman was concerned, it was all about Susan Berman.
Well, Mr. Durst, you would agree Susan Berman didn't say you murdered your wife because you made up a story to Susan Berman to minimize the conduct of how Kathy had died, correct?
I did not make up a story about how Kathy had died. To the best of my knowledge, Kathy is still living.
Wait, you're now saying today you believe Kathy is still alive?
And to the best of my knowledge, she's still alive.
Do you recall the first day of cross-examination, Mr. Durst, that you said that given the situation, that the only reasonable explanation you could come to was that Kathy Durst was now dead? Do you recall testifying to that?
I recall saying that the only evidence that Kathy Durst is dead is the lack of any evidence that she is living.
And do you agree that you accepted that given that,
I have accepted for a good while that she must be dead.
your explanation literally 60 seconds ago was, I believe Kathy Durst is still alive today. So which is it?
Says, to the best of my knowledge, she is living.
So, Mr. Durst, you also a moment ago mentioned Susan Berman writing a letter to the dean. You agree, as you sit up here, there are so many lies coming out of your mouth that you can't even keep track of what the actual lies are, what the lies that you've made on top of the lies are, and you're confused about everything.
Object to the
Correct?
form of the question.
I am not confused. I told very few lies.
Well, so tell us about this letter Susan wrote to the dean that you mentioned a moment ago.
I did not say she wrote a letter to the dean.
Are you aware that literally 2 minutes ago you said Susan wrote a letter to the dean?
I did not say Susan wrote a letter to the dean 2 minutes ago.
Okay, let me continue. One moment. You would agree that during your meeting with Joel Cohen on November 6th and November 7th, he told you there was a strong likelihood that you were going to be indicted by Westchester DA's office for the murder of your wife. Is that correct?
Correct.
You were told to prepare for bail of more than $1 million. Is that right?
Correct.
You actually noted this in the BD story on page 5. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't doubt that I told Teresa Cheatham about what Joel Cohn had told me.
And so you would agree that would be another example of something in the BD story that Teresa and Emily couldn't have made up because it's only you and Joel Cohen that are there, right?
No. Joel Cohn, my sister Wendy Durst Krieger was there. Her husband Doug Krieger was there. My brother Douglas Durst was there. Joel Cohn had an associate there. I see if there's anybody else.
But you would agree, Mr. Durst, that obviously
And
Teresa...
the public relations guy, Mortimer Matz, was there.
But Emily Altman was not there, and Dorita was not there, correct?
Correct.
So for them to write that, you have to have told them that information, correct?
Correct.
All right, let's talk about November 7th. Between November 7th and November 9th, you redrafted your will and prepared power of attorney in preparation to flee to Galveston. Is that right?
I don't think I had decided to go to Galveston yet. I did redo my will and and had a power of attorney prepared.
Page 5 of the BD story, please.
It's 198.
So you agree that you had your estate lawyer redraft your will, prepare power of attorney for your wife so you could get access to, so she could get access to your money and handle your affairs, correct?
Correct.
And this was in preparation for you fleeing, correct?
Correct.
But you're saying you had not decided on November 7th through 9th yet where you were fleeing to, is that right?
Correct.
All right. On November 11th, that is when you would agree the New York media first reported on the reinvestigation, is that right?
Correct.
Now, you previously stated that there was, in essence, like a media frenzy that put you in a panic, is that right?
I don't think I used the word media frenzy. Both the New York Times and the Daily News had stories about the reopening of the investigation.
In fact, Mr. Durst, didn't you testify at your Galveston trial? The question was as follows by Mr. DeGuerin. This is going to be on page 41. This is 115890, if we can put it up. This is going to start on lines 9 through 16. Looks like line 8. Question by Mr. DeGuerin. Bob, if you will, for the jury, paint us a picture of what these tabloids were like when the story broke in New York on November 11, 2000. Answer. It was my picture on the front page of the newspaper, about 6 or 8 inches of newspaper. I don't remember what the captions were, but the hubby thing, something or other about me, quote, hubby didn't care, things like that. Do you recall that being your testimony?
I don't recall it, but I don't doubt it.
And you said that basically your picture was on the front page of the New York papers, is that right?
On the front page of the Daily News.
Mr. Durst, will you agree, I can put the papers up, but will you agree that there's no front page of you on November 11, 2000 for either the New York Post, the New York Daily News, or the New York Times? Do you agree?
No.
Can we put them up, please?
Book 314, 3 pages collectively. Pages of New York Post, Daily News, New York Times. Date, November 11, 2000.
You would agree this is New York Post, dated November 11, 2000.
I think the New York Post got the story after the New York Daily News and the New York Times.
Here's the Daily News. Are you on there? Is there a picture of you on the front page?
No.
Well, you said there was a picture of you on the front page, so you would agree that that was incorrect. Is that right?
Correct.
So, Mr. Durst, how is it that you have said for years, you agree, that my picture was blasted all over the newspapers? You've said that for years, correct?
No, not that I.
Mr. Lewin, banner on the top doesn't mention Mr. Durst, you should see.
What's that?
Not a photo, but there is a reference.
No, but he said his picture, Your Honor.
No, I understand.
I'm aware.
Okay, thank you.
I have not been saying that for years.
Didn't you tell Andrew Jarecki during your interviews with him that, in fact, your pictures were on the front page? Isn't that what you said?
I have no idea.
Well, you agree, though. You said a moment ago, you testified under oath, 2 minutes ago. My picture was on the front page of the New York Daily News. You would agree that at the very least, that was a misstatement on your part, correct?
Correct.
And is it your position that it was not a lie, that it was accidental?
The Daily News did run a story about me.
Motion, strike, non-responsive.
Okay.
That's not my question. Is it your position that your misstatement was an accident, or was it a lie?
My misstatement only dealt with the fact that the picture was not there. There was a story in the Daily News on November 11th about Janine Pirro and the new investigation.
Mr. Durst, wasn't your whole point being that you had to leave New York because your picture was blasted all over the papers and you had to get out of New York City because you were, in essence, being hounded because there's your picture with Bob Durst, killer? That was basically your narrative, correct?
No.
All right. Let's talk about your response to the reinvestigation of your wife, to somebody actually going back to try to find out what happened to her, was to immediately flee to Galveston, correct? Is that right?
Immediately, a week later,
Well, you
2
had to,
weeks later.
you had to prepare to leave. In other words, Mr. Durst, you went to Galveston solely because you were trying to get away from New York, because you were afraid of being indicted for murder. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, your intention in going to Galveston was to, quote, never use the name Robert Durst again. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's what you testified in Galveston to. Is that right?
Correct.
And you discussed this same issue in the BD story, correct?
I think that was all done by Dorisa Cheatham.
So it's in the BD story, you would agree, but you're saying you're not the one that wrote it. It was Dorita Cheatham.
It's in the BD story that I went to Galveston to hide from the authorities in New York, who Joe Cohn told me were going to indict me.
Go to page 4, please, the BD story. Lower, please. I'm looking for where it says during the above dates. I think it's page, no, keep going. It's in, maybe it's gonna be 5. One second. I'd rather see before, maybe it's 3 again. There we go. During the above dates, I lived in Galveston and never used any of the devices that would allow me or the DA to confirm that I was in Galveston. I used no credit cards, wrote no checks, did not use my cell phone or charge calls to my telephone calling cards. I paid only in cash and made all telephone calls from a payphone. Further, I made no telephone calls to anyone I knew and told no one about Galveston. And it's now your position that Dorita made that up? That's not what you told her?
I gave her the dates.
Well, how would she know, for instance, Mr. Durst, unless you
I'm
told
trying to
her?
answer your question.
Okay?
I had talked to Dorisa, about not using my identity when I was in Galveston.
And the reason that you decided to hide your identity in Galveston is that you did not want the New York authorities to be able to find out where you were, correct?
Correct.
And in Galveston, you used aliases such as Dorothy Siner and Jim Cordes, correct?
Dorothy Siner.
You also used the alias when you disguised yourself as a man as Jim Cordis, C-O-R-D-I-S. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
All right, let's go to Galveston Trial 116280. What did you tell Morris Black your name was originally?
Say that again.
When you first met Morris Black as a man, what did you tell him your name was?
I guess I did tell him my name was Jim.
Isn't it true that, in fact, Mr. Durst, let's look here, this is going to be starting at line 2, I think it was. Here we, oh no, it's at the bottom. It says, the few places where I had to give them a name, I would say I was Jim Cordes. That's you, correct?
That's me, correct.
That's what you said, correct?
Correct.
So did you forget that you did that, or were you lying?
I forgot that I had done that.
Now, you were so concerned about being found out that you were in Galveston that you drove your car to Baton Rouge and left it there in a Greyhound lot so that it would be stolen, and then went back to Galveston. Is that correct?
I left my car in the Baton Rouge. Correct.
And your plan was to have the car stolen, and then you took the Greyhound back to Galveston. So the idea was there'd be no trace of where you were, and the police would end up wherever they found your car. It would not be anywhere near Galveston, correct?
Correct.
So that's a pretty, would you agree, a pretty sophisticated idea that you're literally going to drive your car hundreds of miles dump it in a place so that it can be stolen, hope someone takes it, hopes they drive it to someplace even further. You'll take a Greyhound bus back to Galveston. Would you agree that's a pretty sophisticated plan?
That does not sound sophisticated to me. It sounds stupid.
Well, you would agree that's a lot of work and effort, correct?
That was enormous work and effort.
You don't strike me as a Greyhound bus guy, am I wrong or right?
I spent a lot of time on Greyhound buses.
Voluntarily, Mr. Durst?
Once took a Greyhound bus with Stewart and Eric Altman all the way from Los Angeles to New York when the planes were on strike.
Right, so you didn't take the Greyhound bus because you wanted to or liked Greyhounds. You took it because you didn't have another option, correct?
Correct.
You also took a 30-hour bus ride from Galveston or Louisiana up to New York when you were trying to hide your identity as well, correct? Actually, you started in Houston, am I right?
I went from Mobile, Alabama to New York
By Greyhound, correct?
by Greyhound.
And you had the money to fly at that point, correct?
Say that again.
When you did that, that was after you had gone to Galveston, and it was an effort to hide your identity, correct?
Correct.
And is it true, Mr. Durst, that in particular, you did not want anyone in Galveston associating the name Robert Durst with the apartment where you were living on Avenue K? Is that correct?
Correct.
And you agree that when you would use your name in Galveston, it was never connected to your room or to the boarding house on Avenue K. Is that right?
Correct.
And when you would use the alias of Jim Cordes, for instance, in Galveston, that was when you were not dressed up as a woman. Is that right?
That's right.
So between November 11th and December 19th of 2000, when you flew to San Francisco, you made periodic trips back to New York and to other places. Is that right?
Yes.
It was during that time period that you married your wife. Is that correct?
Correct.
You were also terrified at that time that you were going to be charged with Kathy's murder and not given bail. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, I want to go back. Your Honor, this is a good time if it works for the court.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll return at 1:30. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.